My name is Roxie Wells, 34 years old. The phone rang at 12:07 a.m., a sound so thin it felt like a thread pulling me out of sleep. Aunt Roxie, please help me. They locked me in. I'm hungry. I'm scared. The voice was tiny, shaking, like it came from the bottom of a well. I froze, phone pressed to my ear, staring into the dark. Rain was whispering against the windows, the slow, steady kind that seeps into your bones. Lizzy? I said. Baby, where are you? The line hissed, static, and then went dead. For a few seconds I sat there, not breathing. My husband Adam stirred beside me. What is it? He murmured, half asleep. I swung my legs out of bed, heart thudding. It was Lizzy. She said she's locked in somewhere. He blinked, confused. Maybe a nightmare. Call again. But I was already scrolling, pressing redial, long rings, no answer. She's 6, Adam. She doesn't make this up. I grabbed my jacket and keys. Stay with Noah, I told him. I'm driving up. He started to argue, but I was already down the stairs, shoes half tied, the cold slapping my face as I stepped outside. The storm had swallowed the road. Headlights carved tunnels through sheets of water, the wipers fighting for rhythm. The highway shimmered black and silver like wet glass. My mind looped the words, locked in, hungry, scared. Lizzy, my niece, my brother Ian's daughter. Since he checked into treatment, she'd been living with our parents, Gloria and Walt, 3 hours north. They told everyone they were fine, collecting state checks for kinship guardianship, saying, she's a joy, she's picky but delicate. We're taking good care of her. I'd believe them because it was easier to believe. Work, bills, school emails, those little excuses that pile up into neglect. Tonight, those excuses collapsed. By the time I reached their street, the house was swallowed in dark. Not one light. Even the porch lamp was dead. I slammed the car door, rain slicing across my face. Mom! Dad! I pounded the front door. Open up! Where's Lizzy? Silence. Only thunder rolling far away. I ran around the side, mud grabbing at my shoes. Every window locked. The kitchen door refused to budge. Then I saw the rock by the garden path, used to weigh down old flower pots. I lifted it, one hard swing. Glass shattered, rain and cold rushing in. Inside smelled like old wood and wet dust. I flicked the switch. Nothing. Power was out or cut. My phone flashlight quivered in my hand, the beam skating over the familiar furniture that suddenly looked strange. The old sofa, the rug, Dad's desk, everything too still, too clean. Lizzy? My voice cracked. It's Aunt Roxie. Where are you? Nothing. Then, somewhere upstairs, a small sob. Barely a sound, but it split the air. I took the steps 2 at a time, light bouncing off the walls. The sound came from the end of the hall, the storage closet, my chest squeezed. I grabbed the handle, locked. I slammed my shoulder into it, once, twice. On the third hit, the latch splintered. My light caught a small shape curled on the floor, knees to chest, thin pajama top, stuffed bear pressed to her ribs, eyes sunken, cheeks hollow. On the floor, crumbs of stale bread, an empty plastic bottle. Auntie, you came, she whispered. I dropped to my knees, pulled her into my arms. She was weightless, skin cold as porcelain. It's okay, baby. I've got you. No one's going to hurt you again. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I swallowed them. Kid first, questions later. I wrapped her in my jacket, carried her down the stairs, out into the rain. Don't take me back, she begged. Please. No one's taking you anywhere, I said, voice steady. We're going to the hospital. The drive back was a blur. I called 911 on speaker, told the dispatcher everything, voice trembling but clear. They patched me to the nearest ER. When I pulled up, nurses were waiting. Under the white lights, Lizzy looked smaller. The doctor, Dr. Patel, listened as I explained, eyes sharp but calm. Severe malnutrition and dehydration, she said finally. But she'll recover if we refeed carefully. You did the right thing bringing her in. I nodded, numb, holding Lizzy's hand while the IV slipped into her arm. We'll notify CPS tonight, Dr. Patel added. Her words hit like a gavel. Tonight. That fast. Later, when Lizzy finally slept, I sat in the plastic chair beside her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. Machines blinked softly. The scent of antiseptic mixed with rain on my clothes. My anger started to build then, not loud but deep, like coals catching fire. Yesterday, I'd still believed in the story my parents told, the pies, the tidy house, the excuses. I'd accepted them as truth because it was comfortable, because they were my parents. But the truth had been sitting in the dark, locked behind a closet door. I stood, brushed her hair from her forehead, whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." As I stepped into the hall, I looked at the empty phone screen. No calls, no texts from Gloria or Walt, nothing. I drove back towards their house. The storm had eased, leaving the world washed but not clean. When I reached the driveway, the glass from the door glittered under my headlights. Inside, silence. Every shadow seemed to breathe. I moved carefully, phone light sweeping across the room until it stopped on Dad's desk. The drawer was slightly open. Inside, a stack of papers. I hesitated, then pulled one free. Bank statements. Dates. Deposits labeled Kinship Guardian Assistance. Below each, cash withdrawals, electronics, restaurants, a luxury outlet, no pediatric visits, no pharmacy. My hand shook as I photographed every page. Anger wasn't enough. I needed evidence, proof, because without it, they'd call me hysterical, say I overreacted, that she was just delicate. In the next room, I saw the faint glint of my mother's new fur coat hanging on a chair, the one she'd told me was old. The tag was still on. I snapped the photo, heart thudding louder than the rain outside. Somewhere above, the attic vent moaned in the wind, a low, hollow sound, almost like a voice. I turned toward the stairs, but a different sound caught me, a car engine idling far down the road, then fading. Someone watching, or just my imagination? When I stepped back out, I locked eyes with the empty windows. They looked back like they knew I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I drove home to grab a charger, a second phone, and the folder where I kept everything that ever mattered. Birth certificates, mortgage copies, hospital discharge notes from when Noah was born. It felt right that proof would live next to proof. Adam stood in the kitchen when I came in, hair messy, eyes awake now. "How is she?" he asked. "Stable," I said, and my voice almost broke on the word. "CPS is coming. I had to go back for evidence." He looked at the door, at my keys, and then at me. "You're not going alone," he said. "I am," I answered, softer. "Noah's asleep. He needs you here." He pressed his lips together like he wanted to argue, then nodded. Once. Hard. "Call me if anything feels off." I squeezed his hand, tried to absorb that steadiness, and left. The neighborhood around my parents' house slept the way small streets do. Dog barks traveling far, a late TV flickering blue in one window, the hush of sprinklers even in the rain. The broken side door gaped like a missing tooth. Inside, I moved with deliberate care, phone light low, not touching what I didn't need to. In the living room, I took slow photos of Dad's desk, the drawer pulled to the same exact angle as before, the ledger lines of statements, the deposits stamped with state seals. Kinship Guardian Assistance appeared like a mantra, followed by withdrawals that read like appetite, cash, retail, restaurants, electronics, a weekend stay at a place I recognized from my mother's Instagram months ago. The dates lined up with weeks when Lizzy looked smaller to me. I photographed each page twice, then set them back in order, the edges squared, so nothing screamed of intrusion. In Gloria's closet, I found the fur coat again, and the shoes in glossy boxes, size taped neatly on each lid. Receipts tucked under tissue paper. Ceremonial. I snapped photos of logos, dates, amounts. The cold smell of cedar mingled with perfume. I remembered Gloria's voice from some birthday. "We don't have money for extras, Roxie. You know how far groceries go." I took a breath, let it out, and photographed the emptiness on the shelf, where children's medication might have sat if anyone had gone looking for vitamins or iron. On the kitchen counter, a sticky note in my mother's cursive. "Checks Thurs. Walt pickup." It felt like the edges of a confession, the way people write to themselves in shorthand when they're certain no one else will read it. I took the photo and left it exactly where it was. Outside again, I crossed the fence line to the Wilkins place. Valerie and Tom's curtains fluttered before I knocked, like they'd been standing there waiting since the first shatter of glass. When the door opened a crack, Valerie's face showed me she was more than awake. "Natalie?" She started out of habit, then corrected herself. Roxie, what happened? Her hair was pinned up, a robe belted tight. I kept my voice even. I found Lizzy locked in the closet. She's at the hospital. She's safe for now. Valerie's hand flew to her mouth, and she leaned her shoulder into the doorframe, as if suddenly too tired to stand straight. I brought cookies once, she said quietly. Gloria told me I was spoiling her. I heard the little one cry at night. Tom and I argued about whether to call someone. You think you're doing what's right, and then you're not sure until it's too late. Would you write what you heard and saw? I asked. Dates if you have them. Anything you remember. Her eyes filled. For that child? Anything. She called for Tom, and he came in a t-shirt and jeans, face creased. He nodded as I spoke, jaw working. I saw her sitting in their car sometimes at dusk, he said slowly. Engine off, house dark, the adults inside. It didn't feel right. We sat at their dining table, the wood scarred by 1,000 dinners, and drafted statements that sounded like truth and not theater. Simple, dated, signed. Valerie's handwriting wavered at first, then steadied as if courage had weight. Tom added a line about lights going dark when people walked by. When they finished, I took photos and tucked the originals into my folder. Thank you, I said, and meant it with the kind of gratitude that sits behind your ribs and doesn't move. Before dawn, I parked in the hospital garage, uploaded everything to a secure folder, labeled files with cold names. Evidence has to be boring to be strong. In Lizzy's room, the IV pump clicked a steady metronome. She slept without moving, her hand small beneath the blanket, bare tucked under her chin. A nurse had left a paper bracelet on the tray with Lizzy's name and a tiny heart sticker beside it. I wanted to steal that heart and pin it on everything I was about to do. At 8, I called the school. The principal's voice carried that tired kindness you hear in people who have spent their lives telling hard truths in polite words. She's on our rolls, he said, but in reality, absences over 80%. During the worst of the pandemic, we gave flexibility. After that, we reached out. Calls, letters. No doctor's notes ever came. Her teacher marked concerns. Quiet, withdrawn, behind in reading. He paused. We were worried. With limited access, there's only so much we can do without a response. I didn't try to mend what he felt. Could you send the attendance reports and contact log? I asked. We'll also need statements for CPS. Of course, he said, and his voice softened. Thank you for stepping in. An hour later, my inbox pinged with PDFs, dates and columns, letters on letterhead, the record of people trying and being politely walled off. I printed them at a copy place near the hospital where the clerk didn't look up from his crossword as the pages slid warm into the tray. Evidence, mundane and damning. CPS called mid-morning. The caseworker's questions were precise. When, where, who? I answered like I had practiced in my head all night. At the end, she exhaled. She'll be placed under temporary protective custody at the hospital for now, she said. We'll schedule a home assessment for your place today. If you intend to petition for guardianship, you'll want counsel. I have someone in mind, I said, not yet knowing if the name was luck or fate. Adam's friend had mentioned a family attorney once at a barbecue, between kids splashing and a burnt burger. Rebecca Stein. Adam met me in the corridor with coffee and a look that said he was carrying the part of my fear I couldn't hold. Stay with Lizzy, I told him. I'm going to the lawyer. He nodded, and in the small way his hand stayed on my shoulder, a beat too long, I felt permission to be the kind of relentless person this was going to require. Rebecca's office sat on the second floor of a building that used to be a bank. The door hissed shut behind me, and the receptionist led me into a space with shelves of framed certificates and a long table that smelled faintly of lemon oil. Rebecca was mid-40s, quick eyes, a voice that didn't waste words. Tell me everything in order, she said, and I did, from the midnight call to the hospital IV, from the desk drawer to the neighbor statements to the school logs. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, I slid the photos and the prints across. She went through them with a prosecutor's patience, not reacting until the last page, when her jaw tightened just enough for me to see it. This isn't a misunderstanding, she said. It's a pattern. She tapped the statements with a fingertip. State funds intended for care. Immediate withdrawals. Luxury goods. No medical, no nutritional support, no education compliance. Add confinement and neglect. Will petition to transfer guardianship to you as kinship caregiver and freeze payments to the current guardians. Will coordinate with CPS so the placement aligns. She met my eyes. It will be a fight. Not for love of the child, for money and pride. Your parents will weaponize shame. They'll try to set the narrative before you can breathe. My throat tightened. They already said I'm making up stories. Expect more of that, Rebecca said. Expect their attorney to suggest the child is a picky eater, that you're overreaching, that this is a family squabble with hurt feelings. We'll rely on medical evidence and third-party records. You did well getting neighbors and school on record. We'll add the physician's affidavit and CPS notes. She slid a legal pad toward me. I need you to prepare for the cost of truth. It doesn't just sever money lines. It severs the stories families tell to stay intact. I felt something cold and steady land in me, like a key turning. Whatever it costs, I said, and hated that my voice shook. She doesn't go back. Rebecca nodded once, a decision sealing. Then we start today, she said, and we do not blink. The weeks before the hearing stretched like taffy, long, sticky, unending. Each day was divided into 3 parts: work, hospital, and paperwork. I lived on caffeine and adrenaline, the edges of my nerves sharpened by the constant hum of dread. Every time my phone rang, I expected it to be my parents. Sometimes it was. Gloria's messages alternated between wounded theatrics and quiet venom. Roxie, what are you doing to us? You're destroying this family. Or, your father hasn't slept. He's heartbroken. We love that child. I stopped replying, because every word felt like a hook meant to reel me back into their story. Adam tried to keep things normal for Noah. Pancakes on Saturdays, bike rides on Sundays. But even he walked like the air in the house was heavier than it used to be. One night, he found me sitting in the dark, sorting witness statements again, my hands trembling from exhaustion. You can't save everyone, he said softly, but you can save her. The hearing date finally landed on the calendar, a small black print that looked harmless, until I realized it meant facing the people who raised me. Lizzy was improving. Her cheeks had color now, her eyes less hollow. She started drawing again, houses, flowers, sometimes a small figure holding a bear. Once she drew a woman with brown hair like mine, standing beside her and smiling. Underneath she wrote, "Safe now." I folded that paper into my bag and carried it like armor. Rebecca called the night before court. Remember, she said, truth wins because it doesn't need to perform. Let them act. You stay steady. I repeated that line in my head until I fell asleep sitting up on the couch. The courthouse smelled of coffee and polished floors. Room 204, family division. Rows of benches, a clock ticking too loudly, a judge's bench raised just enough to remind everyone that judgment always looks down. Rebecca was calm, hair tied back, files arranged with surgical precision. Across the aisle, Gloria and Walt sat in pressed suits. My mother clutched a tissue she didn't need yet. My father's stare was a lock, flat, cold, unblinking. Their lawyer, a man named Chambers, adjusted his tie with the confidence of someone used to bending truth until it looks polite. The clerk called the case. Dr. Patel testified first. This child presented with signs of chronic malnutrition, she said. Her voice was factual, unshakable. She weighed in the 3rd percentile for her age, displayed deficiencies consistent with long-term undernourishment, and showed evidence of dehydration. These symptoms do not develop in a week. Chambers leaned forward, polite smile hiding sharp teeth. Doctor, could this not also result from a particularly selective child? Some children refuse to eat certain foods. Isn't that common? Dr. Patel's eyebrow lifted. It is common, she said, but this was not preference. This was deprivation. The lab results show anemia and delayed growth markers. This isn't a matter of taste. It's neglect. I wanted to thank her right there, but Rebecca's hand brushed mine, steady. Next came Valerie Wilkins. She looked fragile in the witness chair, hands folded tight in her lap. I heard her crying, she said. Many nights. I tried to bring cookies. Mrs. Harper told me not to spoil her. Did you ever see the child outside? Rebecca asked. Sometimes in the car, Valerie said. The adults were inside, house dark. She sat alone. Chambers rose. Mrs. Wilkins, are you close friends with Ms. Wells? Neighbors for years, Valerie said cautiously. Would you say there was tension between your families? She hesitated, glanced at me. Only when I asked questions. That answer landed like a gavel. The next witness, Lizzy's teacher, walked with that measured calm teachers carry everywhere. She held attendance sheets like holy texts. 92% absence rate, she said. No medical documentation provided. Multiple calls went unanswered. We were deeply concerned. Chambers tried the same tactic. Perhaps illness was involved, or homeschooling. The teacher adjusted her glasses. We were told she was sick often, but no one ever submitted forms, and she was not registered for any homeschooling program. Silence rippled through the room. Then it was my turn. I stood, hands damp, heart hammering against my ribs. Rebecca nodded once. Go. Your Honor, I began, voice trembling at first, then firming with each word. I didn't come here to erase titles like grandmother and grandfather. I came because a child was locked in a closet with no food. I came because she deserves safety. I have a stable job, a home, a husband, a son. I can give her the care she was denied. Gloria's sob cracked the quiet. That's a lie. She's making us out to be monsters. Lizzy was sick. She wouldn't eat. Judge Martinez lifted a hand. Mrs. Harper, you'll have your turn. Walt's jaw flexed. When his turn came, his words were steel. We raised that child. She was delicate. My daughter, Roxie, has always been dramatic. This is her way of punishing us for choosing responsibility when she ran from it. I stared at him, wondering if he believed any of what he was saying, or if denial had finally become oxygen. Rebecca stood for cross-examination. Mr. Harper, could you explain the cash withdrawals following each kinship payment? He blinked. We paid expenses in cash. For what expenses? Food, clothes. Rebecca held up a photo of Gloria's closet, fur coats glinting under LED light. Would that include these? Gloria gasped. That's my private... Answer the question, Judge Martinez said, tone like iron. Gloria's lips tightened. I bought them myself. With what income? Silence. For a full second, all you could hear was the clock ticking above the bench. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was measured. I've reviewed the medical evidence, the financial records, and the witness statements. The evidence shows a clear pattern of neglect and misuse of funds. Therefore, this court transfers guardianship of minor Elizabeth Harper to her aunt, Roxie Wells, as kinship caregiver. Guardians Gloria and Walt Harper are stripped of kinship payments and granted limited supervised contact, subject to CPS approval, effective immediately. Gloria cried out, She's our granddaughter! Walt rose, face gray. From this day, you are no daughter of ours. My mouth was dry, but my voice came anyway. Then I am a parent to your granddaughter. I turned, walked out of the courtroom, each step heavy, final. Outside, the hallway lights were bright enough to sting. Rebecca caught my arm. You did it, she whispered. I nodded, but my chest felt hollow. Victory never feels like the movies. It feels like survival. At home that night, Adam opened the door before I could knock. He didn't need to ask. He saw it in my eyes. She's ours now? Yes, I said. The word came out as a breath, not a shout. Noah came running from his room. Mom, is Lizzy coming to live with us? She already has, I said, pulling him close. For the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of a locked door. But peace doesn't erase loss. It only sits beside it, quiet and patient. Because somewhere between justice and truth, something inside me had broken, and there was no going back. Lizzy moved into our home on a soft gray morning that smelled like rain and laundry detergent. Adam had set up the spare room with pale yellow walls, a small desk, and a bookshelf stacked with picture books. Noah had dragged his old toy chest inside and declared, Everything here is hers now, too. Lizzy stood in the doorway, clutching her bear, her eyes darting from corner to corner like she was trying to memorize the escape routes. It's okay, I told her quietly. This is your room. You can close the door whenever you want, and no one will lock it. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she set the bear on the bed and climbed up beside it. Do I have to stay quiet here? She asked. My chest tightened. You can talk, sing, yell, or whisper, I said. Whatever feels right. The first nights were rough. She woke up crying, trembling, sometimes calling my name, sometimes too scared to speak. I'd sit on the edge of her bed, stroke her hair until her breathing slowed. No one is coming, I'd whisper. You're safe. Some nights she'd ask, what if they come back? And I'd promise her again, even when my own voice shook. They won't, ever. Adam became the anchor I didn't know I needed. He cooked simple meals, soups, oatmeal, warm milk. He joked that he was learning gentle food therapy. Noah tried to teach her board games and shared his stuffed shark collection like he was passing down a crown. For the first time in a long time, laughter started to seep into the house again, timid but real. Still, the silence between moments could feel dangerous. Lizzy had learned to listen for footsteps before relaxing, to eat fast like someone might take the plate away. I caught her once hiding crackers under her pillow. I didn't scold her, I just sat beside her and said, "You don't have to save food anymore." She didn't answer, but the next day the crackers were gone. We started therapy sessions with Dr. Green, a child psychologist recommended by the hospital. Lizzy barely spoke during the first few appointments. She just sat holding her bear while Dr. Green asked gentle questions. But one afternoon, out of nowhere, Lizzy whispered, "I thought it was my fault. I thought I did everything wrong." Dr. Green leaned forward, voice soft. "It wasn't you, Lizzy. It was the adults who didn't protect you." Those words seemed to open a window somewhere inside her. She started talking in fragments, then in full sentences. Drawing helped too. Her sketches became stories. Trees, houses, people holding hands. One day she drew a woman with brown hair and labeled it Mama Nat. I stared at it for a long moment. "Who's Mama Nat?" I asked, smiling carefully. "You," she said shyly. "Can I call you that?" For a second I couldn't speak. Then I nodded. "Yeah, baby. You can." From then on, the name stuck. At first, she said it tentatively, testing the air around it. Then one morning, she called from her room, "Mama Nat, can I have pancakes?" And my heart cracked open in the best way possible. A month later, she started school. The morning of her first day, she stood by the front door, gripping her backpack strap so tight her knuckles went white. "What if they yell at me there?" she asked. "They won't," I said, kneeling in front of her. "Your teacher's name is Ms. Lawson, and she's very kind. And Noah will be right there with you." Noah puffed his chest like a superhero. "I'll sit next to her at lunch." That made her smile, a small, uncertain curve, but it was enough. When we arrived, Ms. Lawson bent down and said, "You must be Lizzy. We've been waiting for you." The class waved. Noah whispered something to the kids near him, and they smiled back at her. Lizzy lifted her hand in a half wave. By the end of that week, she came home humming. She showed me a crayon drawing of a garden full of huge sunflowers. "Ms. Lawson says we can plant one at school," she said. I pinned the picture to the fridge. At home, the rhythm of life returned slowly. Books at night, pancakes on weekends, backyard chalk drawings. Sometimes Lizzy would burst into laughter so loud it startled even her. Other times, she'd fall quiet and stare at nothing for a long while. When that happened, I didn't push. Healing has its own pace. One evening after dinner, Noah built a pillow fort and declared it the safe castle. He insisted that everyone inside was protected by honesty magic. Lizzy crawled in next to him, giggling. Adam and I sat on the floor, watching them whisper and laugh under the flickering light. For the first time, I realized that peace doesn't always arrive in grand moments. Sometimes it's just two kids sharing a blanket fort while the rain taps the windows. But even in that peace, I missed my parents, the version of them I thought I had. The ache was strange, not the sharp pain of anger, but the dull throb of loss. They hadn't called, hadn't written. Some nights I stared at the empty contact thread on my phone, tempted to send a message I'd regret. But then I'd look at Lizzy asleep, her chest rising steady, her fingers unclenched, and I'd remember why silence was sometimes mercy. 2 months after the court ruling, CPS closed the case, officially designating me as Lizzy's guardian. I framed the letter and kept it in the hallway near the family photos, not as a trophy, just as proof that something broken could be rebuilt. That same week, the attic vent moaned again. Only this time, when I went to check, it was just the wind. Still, I stood there a while, hand on the wall, remembering that first night, the storm, the drive, the fear, and how one small voice had saved itself by daring to call out. The next morning, Lizzy came running down the stairs with a new drawing. This one showed a big blue house with 3 stick figures holding hands and a brown dog she must have invented. On the roof, she'd written in uneven letters, "People who love me live here." I stared at it, throat tight. Adam smiled over his coffee. "Frame that one too," he said. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me hesitated. I swiped to answer. Hello? The voice on the other end was rough, low, familiar enough to make my knees weaken. Roxie, it's me. A pause. It's Ian. The world went still for a second. My brother. The man who disappeared into the fog of addiction 5 years ago. I'm back in town, he said quietly. Can I see you? My pulse roared in my ears. You're clean? I am, he said. I've been clean for 3 years. I found a job, a place. I want to see my daughter. For a moment, I couldn't find air. Then I whispered, okay, we'll talk. I hung up, staring at the screen. Adam stepped closer. Who was that? I swallowed hard. My brother. He froze. He's back? I nodded slowly. He wants to see Lizzy. And just like that, peace tilted again, because some doors you thought were closed forever have a way of opening when you least expect them. I told Adam first. We were in the kitchen, morning light slipping through the curtains in thin gold lines. The coffee machine gurgled like it was trying to fill the silence I couldn't. He wants to see her, I said finally. Adam's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. How do you feel about that? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to slam the door shut. The other part, she deserves to know her father if he's really changed. Adam nodded slowly. Then we find out which part is true. That afternoon, I sat with Lizzy in the living room. She was coloring, her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth, the way it always did when she concentrated. Sweetheart, I began carefully, someone called today. Someone who wants to see you. She looked up, crayon paused midair. Who? Your dad, I said softly. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she whispered, Daddy Ian? Yes. Her eyes filled, but I couldn't tell if it was fear or hope. Is he okay now? I nodded. He says he's better. He's been working hard to stay healthy. But you don't have to see him if you don't want to. You get to choose. She thought for a moment, then said quietly, I want to see him. I want to know. That night, after she went to bed, I stood in her doorway watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, but my chest ached with the weight of what was coming. Because even forgiveness can feel like a risk. The next day, Ian came to the house. I almost didn't recognize him at first. His hair was shorter, streaked with gray at the temples, but his eyes, clear and sober, were the same ones from before everything fell apart. He stood on the porch, clutching a small box. Hey, Roxie, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Hi, I answered. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then I stepped aside. Come in. The air felt heavier as he crossed the threshold. Lizzy appeared at the end of the hall, frozen. Ian looked at her like he was seeing sunlight for the first time in years. The box fell open in his hands, revealing a small photo of Marina, Lizzy's mother, smiling in a garden. I kept this, he said, voice shaking, to remind me what I broke. He sank to his knees in front of his daughter. Baby, I'm so sorry. I ran because I thought I couldn't be what you needed. I got lost, but I fought my way back. Lizzy took a tiny step forward, then another, then dropped to her knees and hugged him so tightly his shoulders trembled. Daddy, she whispered. I turned away, tears slipping down before I could stop them. Adam's hand found mine and squeezed. We sat together for hours after that, talking. Ian told us about rehab, therapy, meetings, his job at a small construction company in another city. I'm not asking to take her away, he said, eyes glistening. You've been her real parent all this time. I just want to be near her, if she'll let me. When Lizzy came back into the room with her sketchbook, she sat between us and began drawing quietly. You know what I think, she said without looking up. I think I have 2 parents now, Mama Nat and Daddy Ian. I don't want to lose either. I smiled through tears. You don't have to. The next months were fragile but full of light. Ian visited on weekends, always early, always steady. They went for walks, fed ducks at the park, and once painted flower pots together in the backyard. Each time he left, he'd kneel and say, I'll be back next week, and he always was. Lizzy started sleeping through the night. Her laughter grew louder. She stopped asking if anyone would come take her away. One hot evening that summer, we grilled in the backyard. Adam flipped steaks while Noah chased the dog around the garden. Lizzy sat cross-legged on the patio, drawing. Ian leaned on the fence, watching her. An expression on his face I hadn't seen since before Marina died. Peace. She finished her drawing and ran over, waving the paper proudly. Look, she said. On it was a big blue house, surrounded by trees, and a sun so bright it almost took up the whole sky. On the roof, in uneven letters, she'd written, "People who love me live here." I looked at Adam, at Noah, at Ian, and finally at her. My throat tightened. "That's beautiful," I whispered. Lizzy beamed. "Can we hang it in the kitchen next to the other one?" "Of course," I said. "It belongs there." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat outside under the stars. The air was warm, cicadas humming in the dark. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel like a place I had to survive. It felt like a place I could live in. I thought about the storm, the closet, the courtroom, the betrayal, the forgiveness. All of it had led here, to laughter echoing through the house that once felt too quiet. Maybe redemption wasn't loud. Maybe it was the sound of two children giggling under a blanket fort, the smell of something burning slightly on the grill, the sight of a man finding his way home again. As I stood to go inside, I glanced at the window where Lizzie's new drawing hung. The house she'd drawn had more windows than before, more light, more space. That's what this fight was for. Not revenge, not pride, just the chance for her to have a childhood filled with light. I went inside, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "You're home now, for good." And for the first time, I believed it.